Benjamin Foster had trusted his mailman Tony Rodriguez for 8 years, always greeting him with a friendly wave and occasional conversation about the neighborhood. The 72-year-old retired librarian appreciated Tony's reliability and considered him part of the community fabric. But when Benjamin's bank called about missed Social Security deposits, he discovered Tony had been intercepting and stealing his benefit checks for 5 years, stealing more than $47,000 in federal benefits, while Benjamin struggled to pay bills he thought he couldn't afford. This is the story of how a trusting retiree exposed a systematic mail theft operation that had victimized dozens of elderly residents throughout Portland, and how his investigation led to federal charges that sent a corrupt postal worker to prison. By the time Benjamin was finished, Tony faced multiple federal crimes, and Benjamin had uncovered one of the largest mail theft schemes in Oregon postal history. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. You'll want to hear every detail of how Benjamin's community spirit and persistence brought down a mailman who was literally stealing from the people he was supposed to serve. Benjamin Foster had lived in his modest Portland home for 23 years, becoming deeply connected to the quiet residential neighborhood where everyone knew each other's routines and looked out for one another. At 72, he embodied the community values that made the area special, friendly, helpful, and trusting of the people who served the neighborhood. As a retired librarian and part-time substitute teacher, Benjamin lived comfortably on his pension, Social Security benefits, and modest retirement savings totaling $2.1 million. His financial needs were simple: house maintenance, utilities, groceries, and occasional gifts for his 3 grandchildren who lived across the country. "I've been blessed with enough," Benjamin often told his neighbors: simple living, good friends, and being part of a community where people care about each other. Benjamin's daily routine included morning walks, afternoon reading, and evening conversations with neighbors over the fence. He took pride in knowing everyone on his street and maintaining the kind of neighborhood relationships that were becoming rare in modern society. Tony Rodriguez had been delivering mail to Benjamin's neighborhood since 2015, taking over the route from an older postal worker who had retired after 30 years of service. At 38, Tony seemed energetic and committed to providing good service to the residential community. "Morning, Mr. Foster," Tony would call out as he approached Benjamin's mailbox each day around 11 a.m. "How are you doing today?" "Good morning, Tony. Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Every day is beautiful when you're working in a neighborhood like this." Tony's friendly demeanor and apparent dedication to his job impressed Benjamin and other residents. Unlike some postal workers who seemed rushed or impersonal, Tony took time to chat with residents, remember their names, and show interest in their lives. "Tony's a good man," Benjamin would tell his neighbor Margaret Wilson. "He cares about the people on his route. He's definitely better than the last mailman we had. Tony actually pays attention to what he's doing." Over 8 years, Benjamin and Tony developed what felt like a genuine friendship. Tony would ask about Benjamin's health, comment on his garden, and even offer to help with heavy packages or deliveries when Benjamin wasn't home. "Mr. Foster, I left your package on the back porch so it wouldn't be visible from the street," Tony would explain. "I know you worry about security." "I appreciate that, Tony. It's nice to have someone looking out for us." Benjamin trusted Tony completely, even giving him a spare key to his mailbox, so Tony could ensure important mail was properly secured. The arrangement seemed practical and neighborly, exactly the kind of mutual support that made their community special. What Benjamin didn't realize was that Tony was using this trust to commit systematic federal crimes that were destroying Benjamin's financial security. Beginning in 2019, Benjamin noticed that his monthly finances seemed tighter than they should have been. Despite receiving regular Social Security benefits, pension payments, and having minimal expenses, he found himself increasingly relying on his retirement savings to cover basic living costs. "Margaret, I don't understand why my budget feels so stretched," Benjamin mentioned to his neighbor during one of their evening conversations in 2020. "My expenses haven't increased, but somehow I'm spending more money than I'm taking in. Maybe it's inflation. Everything costs more these days." "It feels like more than that. I used to have money left over each month, but now I'm barely breaking even." Benjamin Foster had trusted his mailman Tony Rodriguez for 8 years, always greeting him with a friendly wave and occasional conversation about the neighborhood. The 72-year-old retired librarian appreciated Tony's reliability and considered him part of the community fabric. But when Benjamin's bank called about missed Social Security deposits, he discovered Tony had been intercepting and stealing his benefit checks for 5 years, stealing more than $47,000 in federal benefits, while Benjamin struggled to pay bills he thought he couldn't afford. This is the story of how a trusting retiree exposed a systematic mail theft operation that had victimized dozens of elderly residents throughout Portland, and how his investigation led to federal charges that sent a corrupt postal worker to prison. By the time Benjamin was finished, Tony faced multiple federal crimes, and Benjamin had uncovered one of the largest mail theft schemes in Oregon postal history. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. You'll want to hear every detail of how Benjamin's community spirit and persistence brought down a mailman who was literally stealing from the people he was supposed to serve. Benjamin Foster had lived in his modest Portland home for 23 years, becoming deeply connected to the quiet residential neighborhood where everyone knew each other's routines and looked out for one another. At 72, he embodied the community values that made the area special, friendly, helpful, and trusting of the people who served the neighborhood. As a retired librarian and part-time substitute teacher, Benjamin lived comfortably on his pension, Social Security benefits, and modest retirement savings totaling $2.1 million. His financial needs were simple: house maintenance, utilities, groceries, and occasional gifts for his 3 grandchildren who lived across the country. "I've been blessed with enough," Benjamin often told his neighbors: simple living, good friends, and being part of a community where people care about each other. Benjamin's daily routine included morning walks, afternoon reading, and evening conversations with neighbors over the fence. He took pride in knowing everyone on his street and maintaining the kind of neighborhood relationships that were becoming rare in modern society. Tony Rodriguez had been delivering mail to Benjamin's neighborhood since 2015, taking over the route from an older postal worker who had retired after 30 years of service. At 38, Tony seemed energetic and committed to providing good service to the residential community. "Morning, Mr. Foster," Tony would call out as he approached Benjamin's mailbox each day around 11 a.m. "How are you doing today?" "Good morning, Tony. Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Every day is beautiful when you're working in a neighborhood like this." Tony's friendly demeanor and apparent dedication to his job impressed Benjamin and other residents. Unlike some postal workers who seemed rushed or impersonal, Tony took time to chat with residents, remember their names, and show interest in their lives. "Tony's a good man," Benjamin would tell his neighbor Margaret Wilson. "He cares about the people on his route. He's definitely better than the last mailman we had. Tony actually pays attention to what he's doing." Over 8 years, Benjamin and Tony developed what felt like a genuine friendship. Tony would ask about Benjamin's health, comment on his garden, and even offer to help with heavy packages or deliveries when Benjamin wasn't home. "Mr. Foster, I left your package on the back porch so it wouldn't be visible from the street," Tony would explain. "I know you worry about security." "I appreciate that, Tony. It's nice to have someone looking out for us." Benjamin trusted Tony completely, even giving him a spare key to his mailbox, so Tony could ensure important mail was properly secured. The arrangement seemed practical and neighborly, exactly the kind of mutual support that made their community special. What Benjamin didn't realize was that Tony was using this trust to commit systematic federal crimes that were destroying Benjamin's financial security. Beginning in 2019, Benjamin noticed that his monthly finances seemed tighter than they should have been. Despite receiving regular Social Security benefits, pension payments, and having minimal expenses, he found himself increasingly relying on his retirement savings to cover basic living costs. "Margaret, I don't understand why my budget feels so stretched," Benjamin mentioned to his neighbor during one of their evening conversations in 2020. "My expenses haven't increased, but somehow I'm spending more money than I'm taking in. Maybe it's inflation. Everything costs more these days." "It feels like more than that. I used to have money left over each month, but now I'm barely breaking even." The timing suggests someone is intercepting the checks during the mail delivery process, Benjamin told his neighbor Margaret Wilson, who had become his informal advisor during the investigation. "You really think Tony could be stealing your mail?" "I don't want to believe it, but he's the only person with access to my mail before it reaches my mailbox." Benjamin's next step was examining the cashed checks to see how his signature had been forged. Social Security provided copies of the canceled checks, which showed crude but effective forgeries of Benjamin's signature. "These signatures don't look anything like my actual signature," Benjamin observed while comparing the forged endorsements to his real handwriting. "But they're close enough that a bank teller might not notice the difference." The forged signatures suggested that whoever was stealing the checks had access to samples of Benjamin's real signature for comparison and practice. "Tony has delivered letters and packages that I've signed for," Benjamin realized. "He's seen my signature dozens of times over the years." But Benjamin needed more evidence before involving law enforcement. He decided to set up surveillance to monitor his mailbox and determine if Tony was actually intercepting his mail. Benjamin installed a small security camera positioned to monitor his mailbox and front porch area. The camera would record mail delivery and show whether Tony was taking mail that should have been delivered to Benjamin's mailbox. "If Tony is stealing my mail, this camera will capture evidence," Benjamin explained to Margaret. "If he's innocent, the recording will prove that, and I'll need to look for other explanations." The surveillance camera would provide definitive evidence of mail theft or exonerate Tony and force Benjamin to consider other possibilities. Benjamin's surveillance camera captured clear evidence of mail theft within 1 week of installation. The recording showed Tony Rodriguez arriving at Benjamin's mailbox, sorting through mail, removing specific pieces, and placing the remaining mail in the mailbox. "Margaret, you need to see this," Benjamin called his neighbor to review the surveillance footage. "Tony is definitely taking mail from my delivery." The recording showed Tony examining each piece of mail carefully, setting aside certain items, and delivering only part of Benjamin's mail to his mailbox. The pattern was consistent across multiple days of surveillance. "He's being very selective about what he takes," Margaret observed. "It looks like he's specifically looking for certain types of mail. Government checks, probably. Social Security, pension payments, anything that looks like it contains money." Benjamin continued surveillance for 2 more weeks and captured additional footage of Tony systematically stealing mail from his delivery. The recordings also showed Tony stealing mail from other houses on the route, suggesting that Benjamin wasn't his only victim. "Tony is stealing mail from at least 4 other houses on this street," Benjamin discovered while reviewing hours of surveillance footage. "This isn't just about my Social Security checks. He's running a systematic mail theft operation." The evidence was clear and substantial, but Benjamin needed to involve federal law enforcement to stop Tony's crimes and recover his stolen benefits. Benjamin contacted the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, the federal law enforcement agency responsible for investigating mail theft and postal crimes. Postal Inspector Sarah Mitchell, "This is Benjamin Foster calling to report systematic mail theft by a postal worker," Benjamin explained during his initial phone call. "Mr. Foster, mail theft by postal employees is a serious federal crime. What evidence do you have of the theft?" Benjamin provided Inspector Mitchell with copies of the Social Security records showing stolen checks, the surveillance footage of Tony stealing mail, and documentation of the forged signatures. "Mr. Foster, this is substantial evidence of systematic mail theft," Inspector Mitchell confirmed after reviewing Benjamin's documentation. "We'll open a federal investigation immediately." The postal inspection investigation would determine the full scope of Tony's mail theft operation and gather evidence for federal prosecution. Postal Inspector Sarah Mitchell's investigation into Tony Rodriguez's mail theft operation revealed a criminal scheme that extended far beyond Benjamin's individual case. Tony had been systematically stealing mail from elderly residents throughout his postal route for more than 5 years. "Mr. Foster, Tony Rodriguez has been operating a sophisticated mail theft ring, targeting elderly residents who receive government benefit checks," Inspector Mitchell reported after reviewing Tony's activities. "Your case was part of a larger criminal operation. The investigation identified 23 elderly residents whose mail had been systematically stolen by Tony, with total losses exceeding $340,000 in government benefits, pension checks, and other financial mail. Tony specifically targeted elderly residents because they often receive predictable government benefits and may not immediately notice when checks are missing," Inspector Mitchell explained. The investigation also revealed that Tony had been working with associates who helped him cash the stolen checks and launder the proceeds. The mail theft was just one part of a broader financial fraud network. Tony wasn't acting alone. He had accomplices who provided fake identification and helped him cash stolen checks at various banks and check-cashing businesses throughout Portland. Postal inspectors worked with Benjamin to conduct a controlled operation that would capture additional evidence of Tony's mail theft activities. Benjamin agreed to request replacement Social Security checks that would provide opportunities to document Tony's crimes. Mr. Foster will coordinate with Social Security to send replacement checks to your address while we conduct surveillance, Inspector Mitchell explained. We need to capture Tony in the act of stealing your mail. The controlled operation involved federal agents monitoring Benjamin's mail delivery while Tony unknowingly provided evidence of his criminal activities. We want to build the strongest possible case against Tony and his associates, Inspector Mitchell said. Your cooperation will help us gather evidence for federal prosecution. The surveillance operation would document Tony's mail theft techniques and identify his criminal associates. The federal sting operation to capture Tony Rodriguez stealing mail required careful coordination between postal inspectors, Social Security investigators, and surveillance teams. Benjamin's cooperation was crucial for timing the operation and ensuring that evidence was captured effectively. Mr. Foster, Social Security will mail a replacement check to your address on Tuesday, Inspector Mitchell explained. We'll have surveillance teams monitoring Tony's activities from the moment the check enters the postal system. The sting operation tracked the replacement Social Security check through the postal delivery process, with federal agents monitoring Tony's route and activities on the day the check was scheduled for delivery. We have surveillance teams positioned throughout the neighborhood to document Tony's activities, Inspector Mitchell reported. If he steals your check, we'll have video evidence of the theft. Benjamin waited nervously at home while federal agents monitored Tony's mail delivery activities. The surveillance operation would either capture definitive evidence of mail theft or prove that Tony was innocent of the crimes. The surveillance footage captured Tony arriving at Benjamin's mailbox, examining the mail delivery, identifying the Social Security check, and removing it from the delivery before placing the remaining mail in Benjamin's mailbox. We have clear video evidence of Tony stealing your Social Security check, Inspector Mitchell confirmed after reviewing the surveillance footage. He's been caught in the act of committing federal mail theft. But the sting operation captured more than just evidence of mail theft. Surveillance teams also documented Tony meeting with associates who helped him cash the stolen check, using fake identification. Tony drove directly from your neighborhood to a check-cashing business where associates were waiting with fake ID to help him cash your stolen check, Inspector Mitchell reported. We have evidence of the entire criminal operation. Federal agents arrested Tony Rodriguez and 3 associates involved in the mail theft and check fraud scheme. The arrests occurred simultaneously to prevent the criminals from destroying evidence or alerting other participants. Tony Rodriguez, you're under arrest for mail theft, check fraud, and conspiracy, postal inspectors announced as they arrested Tony at his home. The arrests marked the beginning of a federal prosecution that would expose the full scope of Tony's criminal activities. Tony Rodriguez faced federal charges including mail theft, check fraud, conspiracy, and elder exploitation. The prosecution was handled by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Oregon, with assistance from Social Security investigators and postal inspectors. Tony Rodriguez exploited his position as a postal worker to commit systematic theft against the elderly residents he was supposed to serve, Prosecutor James Rodriguez argued during opening statements. He violated federal law and community trust while stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars in government benefits. The evidence against Tony was overwhelming. Federal prosecutors presented surveillance footage of Tony stealing mail from multiple residences, financial records showing more than $340,000 in stolen government benefits, forged check endorsements and fake identification used to cash stolen checks, testimony from 23 elderly victims who had suffered mail theft. Benjamin testified about his experience with Tony's theft and the impact it had on his financial security and trust in community institutions. Tony wasn't just stealing my Social Security checks, Benjamin told the jury. He was stealing my ability to trust the people who are supposed to serve and protect our community. The prosecution also presented evidence showing that Tony's mail theft operation had been sophisticated and systematic, targeting elderly residents specifically because they were less likely to immediately notice missing mail. Tony Rodriguez developed techniques for identifying which residents received regular government benefits and timing his thefts to avoid detection, explained Postal Inspector Sarah Mitchell during her testimony. Tony's defense attorney attempted to minimize his crimes by characterizing them as opportunistic theft rather than systematic criminal enterprise. My client made poor decisions but didn't intend to cause serious harm, defense attorney Patricia Stevens argued. These were crimes of opportunity, not organized criminal activity. But the evidence demonstrated systematic planning and execution that contradicted claims of opportunistic theft. Tony Rodriguez kept detailed records of his victims' mail delivery schedules and worked with criminal associates to maximize the proceeds from stolen checks, Prosecutor Rodriguez explained to the jury. The jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts against Tony and his associates. Tony Rodriguez was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $487,000 in restitution to his victims. He also lost his postal employment permanently and faced lifetime prohibition from federal employment. Tony's conviction and imprisonment provided justice for Benjamin and other victims, but the community also needed to recover from the violation of trust that his crimes represented. Benjamin became an advocate for his fellow victims and worked to restore confidence in postal services. Tony's crimes hurt more than just our bank accounts, Benjamin explained during a community meeting organized to address the mail theft scandal. He damaged our ability to trust the people who serve our neighborhood. The U.S. Postal Service implemented new security measures for the affected neighborhood, including enhanced supervision of mail carriers and additional monitoring of government benefit deliveries. We're committed to ensuring that nothing like this happens again, explained Portland Postmaster Michael Torres. Tony Rodriguez's crimes violated everything we stand for as postal employees. Benjamin worked with other victims to ensure they received full restitution and appropriate support services to recover from the financial and emotional impact of Tony's crimes. Some of my neighbors depleted their savings trying to make up for stolen Social Security checks, Benjamin reported. We need to make sure everyone gets the help they need to recover financially. The restitution process took more than 2 years, but all victims eventually recovered their stolen benefits plus interest and penalties. The federal government also provided additional support services for elderly victims who had suffered significant financial hardship. Benjamin's leadership during the community recovery process helped restore neighborhood cohesion and trust in public services. Benjamin turned a terrible situation into an opportunity for our community to become stronger and more connected, observed neighbor Margaret Wilson. But Benjamin's advocacy work extended beyond his immediate neighborhood to protect other elderly residents from similar crimes. Benjamin transformed his experience with mail theft into advocacy work that helped protect elderly residents throughout Portland from similar crimes. He worked with law enforcement agencies, community organizations, and government officials to develop prevention programs and victim support services. Tony's crimes taught me that elderly residents are specifically targeted for mail theft because criminals assume we won't notice or won't fight back, Benjamin explained during a presentation to the Portland Elder Rights Coalition. We need to prove them wrong. Benjamin helped develop educational programs that taught elderly residents how to recognize signs of mail theft and protect themselves from postal crimes. Mail theft often starts gradually and escalates over time, Benjamin explained during his presentations. The key is recognizing early warning signs and reporting suspicious activities immediately. The educational programs included information about monitoring mail delivery schedules and patterns, recognizing signs of mail tampering or theft, understanding how to report postal crimes to federal authorities, protecting government benefit checks through direct deposit. Benjamin also worked with postal officials to improve security measures and employee screening procedures to prevent future mail theft by postal workers. Tony's crimes showed us that we needed better oversight and monitoring of postal employees who have access to sensitive mail, Benjamin explained. The Portland Postal District implemented new security protocols based on recommendations from Benjamin and other community advocates, including enhanced background checks for postal workers and improved surveillance of mail processing facilities. Benjamin's advocacy work had impact beyond Portland, as federal authorities used his experience to develop national programs for preventing and investigating mail theft targeting elderly residents. Benjamin Foster's systematic approach to investigating and fighting mail theft has become a model for communities nationwide, explained U.S. Postal Inspector General Michael Rodriguez. Benjamin's experience with mail theft became required study material in postal security training programs, elder protection courses, and community safety education. His systematic approach to investigating Tony's crimes provided a template for recognizing and fighting mail theft. The Foster case demonstrates how community members can effectively investigate and report postal crimes, explained postal security educator Dr. Jennifer Walsh at Portland State University. Benjamin's methodical approach to gathering evidence has become standard training material. Law enforcement agencies invited Benjamin to speak about his experience and educate officers about investigating mail theft and protecting elderly victims from postal crimes. Benjamin Foster's case taught us important lessons about how mail theft operations target elderly residents, Benjamin explained during a presentation to postal inspectors. Tony's systematic approach to targeting elderly victims showed us criminal techniques we needed to understand. Consumer advocacy organizations used Benjamin's experience to educate elderly residents about protecting themselves from mail theft and recognizing suspicious postal activities. Benjamin proved that elderly residents can effectively fight back against postal crimes when they approach the problem systematically, explained Elder Rights Coalition Director Margaret Foster. Educational institutions incorporated Benjamin's case into criminology and elder protection curricula, using his investigation techniques to teach students about community-based crime prevention. The Foster case represents an excellent example of how individual advocacy can expose systematic criminal activity, explained criminal justice professor Dr. Robert Chen at Portland Community College. The ongoing educational impact of Benjamin's case continued expanding as more institutions recognized the value of his experience for training professionals and protecting vulnerable populations. Benjamin's case led to comprehensive reforms in postal security and employee oversight designed to prevent mail theft by postal workers. The Foster Postal Security Act was proposed in Congress to strengthen penalties for mail theft and improve protection for elderly mail recipients. Benjamin Foster's case exposed vulnerabilities in our postal security systems, explained Senator Patricia Williams, who sponsored the federal legislation. We needed stronger protections for elderly residents who are specifically targeted for mail theft. The proposed legislation included enhanced background checks for postal employees, mandatory training on elder protection and mail security, improved surveillance and monitoring of mail processing, stronger penalties for postal employees who commit mail theft. The U.S. Postal Service implemented new security protocols based on lessons learned from Benjamin's case, including enhanced supervision of mail carriers and additional monitoring of government benefit deliveries. The Foster case taught us that we needed better systems for detecting and preventing mail theft by postal employees, explained Postal Service Security Director Michael Torres. Insurance companies developed new coverage options for mail theft victims, providing financial protection for residents who suffered losses due to postal crimes. Benjamin's case created awareness of mail theft as a significant risk for elderly residents, explained insurance industry analyst Dr. Jennifer Walsh. We developed products to help protect vulnerable populations. The reforms inspired by Benjamin's case had national impact, as postal districts throughout the country adopted similar security measures and employee oversight procedures. Benjamin Foster's advocacy has made postal services safer for elderly residents nationwide, explained U.S. Postal Inspector General Patricia Rodriguez. 3 years after exposing Tony's mail theft operation, Benjamin had transformed his experience from victimization into community leadership and advocacy that protected other elderly residents from postal crimes. Tony's theft taught me that criminals target elderly residents specifically because they assume we won't fight back effectively, Benjamin reflected during a recent interview. My response proved that assumption wrong. Benjamin established the Foster Foundation for Elder Protection, which funds advocacy services for elderly crime victims and supports research into preventing crimes targeting older adults. I want to ensure that no other elderly resident experiences what Tony put me and my neighbors through, Benjamin explained during the foundation's launch. Mail theft is a violation of trust that damages entire communities. The foundation had helped more than 180 elderly crime victims recover from various forms of exploitation, providing legal assistance, financial recovery services, and emotional support. Benjamin's personal recovery had progressed significantly through his advocacy work and the justice achieved through Tony's prosecution and the postal security reforms his case inspired. Fighting Tony's crimes gave me a sense of purpose and connection to my community, Benjamin reflected. Instead of being isolated by victimization, I became more involved in protecting others. Benjamin had also developed meaningful relationships with other crime victims and community advocates, creating a support network that extended far beyond his original neighborhood. Benjamin showed all of us that elderly residents can be effective advocates when we work together, said Thomas Chen, another mail theft victim who worked with the foundation. His courage and persistence gave us tools to protect ourselves and our community. Tony Rodriguez remained in federal prison, serving his 12-year sentence with multiple appeals unsuccessful. The mail theft network he had operated was completely dismantled, with associates serving sentences and victims receiving full restitution. Benjamin's financial security had been completely restored through the restitution process, with enhanced protection systems preventing future mail theft and exploitation. Benjamin's leadership in fighting mail theft had made him a recognized advocate for elderly rights and community safety throughout Portland. His experience with Tony's crimes provided credibility and expertise that enhanced his effectiveness as a community leader. Benjamin Foster represents the best of community advocacy, explained Portland Mayor Patricia Johnson during a ceremony recognizing Benjamin's contributions to elder protection. His courage in fighting postal crimes has made our entire community safer. Benjamin had been appointed to the Portland Elder Safety Advisory Council, where he helped develop policies and programs to protect elderly residents from various forms of exploitation and abuse. Benjamin's experience with mail theft gave him insights into how criminals target elderly residents, explained Council Coordinator Dr. Michael Torres. His expertise has been invaluable for developing prevention programs. The Advisory Council had implemented new community safety initiatives based on Benjamin's recommendations, including neighborhood watch programs specifically focused on protecting elderly residents from postal crimes and other forms of exploitation. Benjamin also worked with local law enforcement agencies to train officers in recognizing and investigating crimes targeting elderly residents. Benjamin Foster's case taught us important lessons about how elderly residents can be effective partners in crime prevention, explained Portland Police Elder Crimes Unit Commander Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez. The community leadership roles Benjamin had assumed provided him with platforms for continuing his advocacy work while strengthening neighborhood connections and mutual support systems. Benjamin turned his victimization into community empowerment, observed neighbor Margaret Wilson. He showed all of us that we can protect each other when we work together. At 75, Benjamin had found new purpose through his advocacy work and community leadership roles. The Foster Foundation had become a significant elder protection organization, funding programs that had prevented dozens of crimes targeting elderly residents. Tony's mail theft was terrible, but fighting back against his crimes connected me to my community in ways I never expected, Benjamin explained during the Foundation's 3rd anniversary celebration. Advocacy work has given my retirement meaning and purpose. The Foundation's work had expanded to include preventative education for elderly residents, helping potential victims recognize signs of various scams and crimes before they suffered losses. Benjamin had also developed expertise in elder protection law, working with attorneys and policymakers to strengthen legal protections for elderly residents facing exploitation. Benjamin's practical experience with postal crimes combined with his community connections makes him uniquely qualified to advocate for elder protection, explained Elder Rights Coalition Director Margaret Foster. The personal satisfaction Benjamin derived from his advocacy work had helped him process the trauma of Tony's betrayal while creating positive outcomes from his negative experience. Tony thought elderly residents like me would be passive victims who wouldn't fight back effectively, Benjamin reflected. Instead, his crimes motivated me to become an advocate who has helped protect hundreds of other elderly residents. Benjamin's ongoing mission included expanding the Foundation's work to other regions and developing new programs for supporting crime victims while preventing similar criminal operations. We're not just helping people recover from crimes, Benjamin explained. We're building systems to prevent these crimes from happening in the first place. The impact of Benjamin Foster's fight against mail theft extended far beyond his individual case, creating permanent changes in postal security, elder protection, and community safety programs across the United States. Postal security experts had incorporated lessons from Benjamin's investigation into their training programs for detecting and preventing mail theft by postal employees. The Foster method of systematic evidence gathering had become standard protocol for investigating postal crimes targeting elderly residents. Benjamin Foster's meticulous approach to documenting mail theft has revolutionized how we investigate postal crimes, explained U.S. Postal Inspector General Patricia Rodriguez during a congressional hearing on postal security. His techniques have helped us identify and prosecute dozens of similar schemes nationwide. The case had also influenced federal legislation addressing mail theft and elder protection. The Postal Security and Elder Protection Act, passed by Congress, included provisions specifically inspired by Benjamin's experience, creating enhanced penalties for postal crimes targeting elderly residents. Benjamin's case demonstrated that mail theft is often part of systematic criminal enterprises targeting vulnerable populations, explained Senator Patricia Williams, who sponsored the federal legislation. We needed stronger protections and more effective investigation tools. Community safety organizations had used Benjamin's experience to develop neighborhood watch programs specifically designed to protect elderly residents from postal crimes and other forms of exploitation. The Foster case showed us that community members can be effective partners in crime prevention when they're educated and empowered, explained National Neighborhood Watch Coordinator Dr. Jennifer Walsh. Academic institutions continued studying Benjamin's case as an example of how individual advocacy can create systemic change in public safety and elder protection. Criminal justice programs, social work schools, and public administration courses required students to analyze his investigation and advocacy techniques. Benjamin Foster's case represents a new model of community-based crime fighting, explained public safety professor Dr. Robert Chen at Portland State University. His systematic approach to investigation and advocacy has become a template for community crime prevention. The international impact of Benjamin's case had reached elder protection programs worldwide, with organizations in Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom requesting consultation on developing similar community-based crime prevention initiatives. Mail theft targeting elderly residents is an international problem, explained International Elder Protection Alliance Coordinator Maria Rodriguez. Benjamin Foster's community-based approach to fighting postal crimes is being adapted by elder protection programs globally. Today, Benjamin Foster lives peacefully in his Portland home, protected by enhanced postal security measures and surrounded by a community that understands the importance of mutual protection and support. At 75, he has transformed one of the most personal violations possible into a foundation for protecting elderly residents from exploitation throughout the Pacific Northwest. The mailbox where Tony Rodriguez stole Benjamin's Social Security checks now receives mail delivered by postal workers who understand that community trust is sacred and that their service protects some of society's most vulnerable people. The space that was used to commit federal crimes now serves as a symbol of restored trust and community resilience. Tony thought my age and trusting nature made me an easy target who wouldn't fight back effectively, Benjamin reflects. He assumed I would accept his theft as an unfortunate reality and continue struggling financially without understanding why. But he underestimated what a lifetime of community service had taught me about persistence, investigation, and the importance of protecting others. Tony Rodriguez remains in federal prison, serving his 12-year sentence with no possibility of early release. His postal career ended permanently, and he faces lifetime prohibition from federal employment of any kind. The Foster Foundation has recovered more than $2.3 million in settlements and donations, funding elder protection services and postal security programs that have helped more than 400 elderly residents avoid or recover from various forms of exploitation. Benjamin's investigation techniques have become standard protocol for postal crime prevention nationwide. Benjamin Foster proved that elderly residents don't have to be passive victims of postal crimes, said U.S. Postal Inspector General Patricia Rodriguez during the Foundation's 4th anniversary celebration. His systematic approach to fighting mail theft has prevented more crimes than we'll ever be able to count. But perhaps Benjamin's greatest victory was personal, proving that community trust can be rebuilt stronger than before when violations are addressed with courage and determination. Tony's theft taught me that trust isn't just given, it has to be earned and protected through accountability, Benjamin concluded. His crimes damaged our community's faith in postal services, but our response rebuilt that trust on a foundation of transparency and mutual responsibility. Benjamin's restored financial security represents more than just recovered Social Security benefits. It symbolizes the power of community advocacy to create justice and protection that extends far beyond individual cases. His partnership with federal authorities and community organizations demonstrates that elderly residents can be effective crime fighters when equipped with proper support and resources. The story of Benjamin Foster proves that postal crimes can be defeated when victims respond with systematic investigation rather than passive acceptance. When faced with mail theft, elderly residents can apply community connections and persistent advocacy to protect themselves and others, while ensuring that criminals face appropriate consequences for their violations. Benjamin's mailbox now receives every piece of mail that's meant for him, but more importantly, his experience has created protection systems for thousands of elderly residents who now understand how to recognize and fight postal crimes before they cause serious damage. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, Community trust is built through accountability, and elderly residents can be powerful advocates when they understand their rights and work together to protect each other. As I finish telling you Benjamin Foster's story, I want you to understand something that should concern every person who has ever trusted a postal worker, delivery driver, or service person with access to their personal property. Benjamin's experience represents a growing epidemic of service worker exploitation that specifically targets elderly and vulnerable populations. Every month since Benjamin's case became public, I receive messages from viewers sharing similar experiences. Mail carriers who seem to know too much about residents' financial situations. Delivery drivers who ask unusual questions about household routines. Service workers who show excessive interest in elderly customers' personal information. What makes Benjamin's story remarkable isn't that a postal worker was committing mail theft. It's that Benjamin had the community connections and determination to investigate systematically when something felt wrong. Most mail theft victims never realize their mail is being stolen, attributing financial difficulties to other causes while criminals continue exploiting their trust. Benjamin Foster's community connections and investigative persistence gave him advantages that most elderly mail theft victims don't have, explains Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who researches postal crimes. Most elderly residents assume that financial difficulties are normal parts of aging rather than signs of systematic theft. But Benjamin's story teaches lessons that any elderly resident can apply. The importance of monitoring mail delivery patterns and financial deposits. The value of maintaining detailed records of expected government benefits. The power of community networks in detecting and fighting systematic crimes. Consider how Tony Rodriguez's scheme operated for 5 years before Benjamin exposed it. The postal worker had perfected techniques for identifying elderly residents who received predictable government benefits while maintaining the appearance of helpful community service. Mail theft targeting elderly residents has become extremely sophisticated, explains U.S. Postal Inspector General Patricia Rodriguez. Criminals like Tony Rodriguez understand how to exploit community trust while stealing systematically from the people they're supposed to serve. The psychological impact of mail theft extends far beyond financial losses. When service workers exploit the trust that elderly residents place in community institutions, they damage faith in the systems that vulnerable people depend on for security and connection. Having your mailman steal from you feels like having your entire community turn against you, explains trauma counselor Dr. Patricia Martinez, who specializes in elderly crime victims. Mail carriers are symbols of reliable community service, so their betrayal damages trust in all public institutions. Benjamin's systematic response to Tony's theft created a template that other elderly residents can follow, but it also revealed how much individual advocacy is required to challenge institutional authority and fight sophisticated crimes. Benjamin had to become a postal crime investigator to protect himself and his neighbors, observes elder rights advocate Margaret Foster. Most elderly residents shouldn't need federal investigation skills to receive the mail they're entitled to. The regulatory changes inspired by Benjamin's case have strengthened postal security and elder protection, but enforcement remains challenging as criminals continue developing new techniques for exploiting service relationships. We're fighting an ongoing battle against increasingly sophisticated crimes targeting elderly residents, explains Portland Postal Security Coordinator Michael Torres. Benjamin's case taught us about criminal techniques we hadn't previously understood. The most important lesson from Benjamin Foster's experience isn't about mail theft specifically. It's about the necessity of systematic vigilance when service relationships seem inconsistent with normal patterns or expectations. Benjamin's 8 years of friendly interactions with Tony provided him with baseline expectations that helped him recognize when something was wrong. Elderly residents who maintain awareness of normal service patterns are better equipped to identify systematic exploitation. Benjamin's case demonstrates the importance of paying attention to routine services and questioning inconsistencies, explains community safety educator Dr. Robert Chen. Elderly residents who monitor service patterns can detect crimes before they cause serious damage. The foundation Benjamin established continues growing, as more elderly residents discover they're not alone in experiencing service worker exploitation. The support network he created provides both practical assistance and emotional validation for people whose trust has been violated by those who should have been protecting their interests. Benjamin showed us that elderly residents can be more than just victims of postal crimes, says Foundation Coordinator Thomas Chen, himself a mail theft victim. His example gave us tools to protect ourselves and our communities. As service industries become more complex and less regulated, elderly residents will likely face increasing attempts at exploitation by workers who have access to their homes, mail, and personal information. But Benjamin's story provides hope that elderly residents can protect themselves and others through community connections and systematic advocacy. The most valuable lesson from Benjamin Foster's experience is that community trust is built through accountability and transparency rather than blind faith in service authority. When service patterns don't make sense or seem inconsistent with expectations, elderly residents have both the right and the responsibility to investigate and challenge. Benjamin transformed his mail theft victimization into community protection, but every elderly resident can apply his systematic approach to monitoring service relationships and protecting their own interests. Trust service workers who welcome questions, provide transparent explanations, and demonstrate consistency between their actions and their responsibilities.